Welcome to Cats and Novel Adventures. Today is the day that Jen and I are going to discuss The Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. This is our group read for the Nevermore Readathon. And I'm very, very excited to be here to talk about our group read. It is one of my favorites, as I know it is one of yours, Jen. But can you introduce yourselves to anyone who might not know who you are? Because that seems impossible, but anything's possible, right?
So anything is possible.
For anybody that's new to my channel, and Jen's going to tell you a little bit about herself. And I actually put a link in here for anyone who is not subscribed to Jen to check her channel out as well. So Jen, take it away.
Hello, I'm Jen. I'm at Literary Love 123, where I read, discuss, and analyze horror through a literary lens. I am a certified Poe professor and Poe fanatic who actually has not only this life-size cutout of Poe behind me, but over there I have a shrine built to Poe. So I am all things Poe. I'm ready to go.
Yes, and if y'all noticed, I put myself in as the I'm saying hi Carmen. I'm trying to figure out I put banners and stuff in, guys, but who knows, I may mess up. But I put myself as the pollinator because Travis named Jen and I on our sprints for Nevermore. I am pollinating the masses with Poe. I want everybody to read Poe. I'm influencing everybody.
Spreading like the Red Death.
That's right. That's exactly right. And Jen is an expert in Poe. I'm just saying. At least I think she's an expert in Poe. She's very, very knowledgeable of this man. And
I'm just obsessed.
Yeah. I'm a little obsessed myself.
Yes.
So let's see who is here before we go into when we jump right into everything with our story. Swank's here saying howdy to everybody. She's saying happy Robert Burns Day, happy Opposite Day, and happy Irish Coffee Day.
Oh, should know that. Put something extra in here.
Swank said earlier, I listened to Hop Frog. Good story. They used parts of the Masque of the Red Death movie with Vincent Price. Yes, good catch with that. Carmen, hi again, Carmen. And ED's here. Hello, ED. ED also watched the film. I know that. I saw him post that on Instagram. And I think he did a video, and I need to go and check that one out. I didn't have a chance before we met, so I could have inserted some things that I learned from him. Jamie's here. Hello, Jamie. And ED said it's so good. I agree. Linda's here. Hello, Linda. Eleanor's in the house. Hello, Eleanor. Stina, too. Jen at Pages in Chaos. And Edie says, I love that you're a professor. He was just a Poe boy living a Poe life. That's right. Yeah. When you think about that, I'm hearing Queen in my head.
Yes.
Jellicle is also here. If anyone's not subscribed to Jellicle on Instagram, she was nice enough to post the Masque of the Red Death cocktail in Discord under recipes. Sadly, Barry could not find some of the ingredients, so I was not able to make it. So I'm going to have to search that out for a future drink night because I want to try it. She posted her kitty cat on the Cat and Cocktails, and it is so cute. It is so, I mean, it was perfect. It was a perfect picture. That's all I'm going to say. But check her out because she does thematic cocktails all the time on that platform. What do you call an Instagram? On her Instagram account. I don't know what you call it. Enchanted Crimson is here. Hello, Enchanted Crimson.
Love the name.
Yes, I know. I love that. And Edie said, I will tell you now, I'm disappointed with my video, but didn't have time to redo it. Hey,
I thought it was great, Edie.
Okay, so you see, the professor says it was great. And Edie said, by the way, I found the Masque of the Red Death with Patrick McNee. Someone put it on YouTube last night. Is this the one that's in the 80s? The 80s?
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet, but thank you for letting me know, Edie, because I am curious.
Well, I will tell you, Barry is the one that told me that they do have that adaptation because he likes to, whenever we're watching a movie, he likes to like look at the cast members and get some information about them and everything. So when we were watching the 1964 film, he said, that there's one from the I think he asked, are we watching the one from the 80s or the 60s? I said, oh, the 60s. I didn't even know they had one with the 80s. So that's good to know for future reference. And okay, so I was trying to see if I could get these banners to scroll, but I don't know. I put my welcome here, but it's just stopping. So I don't know why. It's not, oh, you know what? There's a timer on it. What the heck? So
yeah, I've noticed there's like what part there's a timer, and then I think it's under that it says scroll.
Yes, and that's what I did. I thought I had
but not why my kitty won't share.
And look, I hit scroll and it still won't. Oh, wait. There it is.
Yay.
Okay. And let me get this off of there. Okay. Don't mind me. I'm just playing. I hardly ever do anything with the banners when I'm doing a discussion. So this is sort of like being a guinea pig for this. So welcome to the Masque of the Red Death discussion with spoilers. So if you have not read this short story by Edgar Allan Poe, we are going to be doing a deep dive into it and spoiling everything and it's our thoughts. But as with anything with literature, interpretation. This is just our interpretations based on what we thought and what we have researched by reading Poe, because Poe is one that you can really go down a rabbit hole with. And I was telling Jen before we came on here, for being such a short story, we could probably talk for about 4 hours about it, because we'd be like, oh, and what about this? And what about that?
Yeah.
So anyway, The Masque of the Red Death was first published as the Masque, M-A-S-K, of the Red Death in Graham's Ladies and Gentlemen's Magazine in May of 1842. Okay, I got that information off the storyoftheweek.org. It was later republished in the Broadway Journal as the Masque, M-A-S-Q-U-E, of the Red Death in July of 1845, at the time that Poe was editing that magazine. So we are familiar as readers today with the second title, the one that was republished in 1845. And I thought this was interesting because I didn't realize until I was getting my notes together that there was a change in title between when it was first published and republished. Did you know that already, Jen?
I did not.
Okay, good. So I'm glad I wasn't the only one. So, Masque, M-A-S-K, is a face covering that can be used for disguise, protection, or a performance. And Masque, M-A-S-Q-U-E, is an archaic term that is short for masquerade. And this is referring to a dramatic performance or costume ball popular during the 16th and 17th centuries in Europe, and many of the participants would wear masks because it would be for performance or decoration, all of the part of the allure of disguising themselves, while they're at this masquerade, this ball. So I reached out to Jen and said, hey, why does Poe revise the title? And that's where, let me see if I can get this up. This is where, and if anybody knew that, please let me know, because I did not know that. So, oh, here we go again. It's got a timer on it, y'all. That is the weirdest thing to me. Okay. I did scroll and I saved it. And so now I want to show it.
Yay!
Okay, maybe you got to do it 10 times before it works. I don't know. So why did Poe revise the title in 1845, Masque versus Masque? So if anyone knew this, let me know in the chat if you already knew this, because you're going to get a gold star for already knowing that. So for me, the word masque, M-A-S-K, in the title puts emphasis on that uninvited guest that shows up with his mask. But then it also speaks to me about the guest and Prospero, however you pronounce it, hiding from the plague. Like the participants are wearing these masks. So it's like or they're like in disguise. Like maybe if the Red Death doesn't see them, then they won't be affected by it. But to me, it's also emphasizing the actual Red Death, that mysterious stranger that comes in. Whereas the Masque, Masque, is putting some emphasis on the masquerade ball where all these unfortunate events take place. So that's what I was thinking about. What about you, Jen?
I was thinking, about just the name too, the mask representing, like you said, the covering of the face, because these people are doing certain deeds. We don't get the details because Poe wasn't really at liberty to write that. But I mean, what do you think people are doing in these rooms, the secluded place, covering their faces? So they're also hiding from these deeds that they're doing. But I also too thought about the way that the Red Death covers someone in a mask of blood. I mean, their whole body is bleeding, but their faces too. So it's like you're masked with your disguise. You think you're hiding, but when you're unmasked, you're going to be masked instead in blood. So your deeds are going to come to the surface no matter what you try to do. So I really started thinking just about the title, about the being the face covering, but also a death mask, because when we get to the end of the story, we find out that this masquerade, this interloper is masked in the habiliments of the grave. So that was like, to me, not only like what you would wear on your body, but also a death mask like they used to make. So that's kind of the things I was thinking about with Poe playing with that word mask. So either way, if he ended it with like the K or the QUE, it still has a lot of those same connotations.
Yes, I think that's awesome. I never even thought about you being masked with blood or like the infection or however it's going to present itself. So if you're hiding behind a mask, to prevent that, because I mean, really and truly, could someone have gone into, I know that it was like a quick thing, but could someone have gone in with having the contagion on them? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And if they were masked, throughout, or they were covered or like hiding in the shadows, they could have been what really caused the issue. Like these people could have been sick,
Mm-hmm.
all this time or whatever. And so they're like pretending, like this is not really happening to them because they think that they're secure or whatever. So that is a very, very good point. I love that. And, I'm just trying to see. ED saying good point. So I'm wondering if you're saying if that's a good point about the title revision. But yeah, I was really surprised by that and found that even more intriguing, because depending on how you read the story, both words work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I really love that. Okay, so Jen is going to be kind enough to give us a little overview of the Masque of the Red Death, just to put that in perspective before we jump into the themes. So go ahead, Jen.
So the Red Death is a plague that is spreading across the kingdom, and Prince Prospero, like so many leaders would do and are doing, shuts himself off along with the most esteemed courtiers and other nobles to revel and party and just have a wonderful time, while the rest of the kingdom, the lesser thans, according to his view, are all dying of the Red Death. And he has this idea that he'll throw this party with this masquerade and everyone's going to have a wonderful time. And his decadence and opulence lead to decay and utter ruin.
Very nice. You said that very eloquently.
I've had a lot of practice. I've taught this a few times.
Yeah, I would. Yes, yes. That's why I decided to let you go ahead and do the overview for us. So this short story is considered Gothic horror, and it's listed in the Tales of Mystery and Horror in my collection. This is the collection that I'm reading out of, and it has quite a few themes or topics that I think are worth discussing. And so the question here is, what are the themes in the Masque of the Red Death. So for me, one theme is death is both natural and unavoidable. The Red Death serves as a form of moral decay, and the illusions of safety is fragile. It's very frail. So those are my themes. What about you, Jen? What are your themes or topics that stood out to you?
The same as you, and then also that class distinction between
Okay.
the haves and the have-nots. But that can tie in also to death, that it doesn't matter how wealthy you are or how much in poverty you are, death is going to come for everyone.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And you see that also in the 1964 adaptation, and you also see it in the television show, The Fall of the House of Usher. Episode 2 is The Masque of the Red Death. And you see that because I think what happens with the wealthy is a lot of times they don't think they can be touched by anything. They can have their guards, they can have their wealth, they can have, all the fanciest of whatever. And at the end of
Their
the day,
bunkers.
well, at the end of the day, they're human
Mhm.
and they can't escape it, kind of thing. So we are going to jump right into discussing those themes, which are at the heart of the story. So the first is death is both natural and unavoidable. So with that, I think the Red Death to me is a natural just part of life because the Red Death is about a plague that pretty much is affecting your blood. I mean, like it's getting into your blood. And blood, of course, we need blood to live, right? That is our lifeline. And the Red Death also, the plague also cannot live unless it's in the blood. So that's where I think it's like more natural. What about you, Jen? I mean, how are you looking at it as being natural, the Red Death being natural?
Yeah, I agree because blood represents death, but it also represents life. And so when you're infected with this, it talks about how it's just a rapid, event, like 30 minutes. You start showing the signs and you're bleeding from everywhere. And Poe also really leans into his philosophy of composition when it comes to the unity of effect, that a belief that he had that you start a story only when you have the ending in mind.
Uh,
So if you look at the very first few lines, I'm just going to read them, and then like the final lines, because it really encompasses what you said about blood and the Red Death. The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal, the redness and the horror of blood. And then when we get to the end, the way
mhm.
that he ends it, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. So it really starts and ends the same way, with this idea that
Mhm.
death is coming for everyone and its display is going to be in blood.
Exactly. Like it's all like it's like a circular thing,
Mm-hmm.
birth, death. Think about it. When we were born, I mean, there's blood present at our birth, right? And then
Yep.
if you are suffering from this particular plague, you're going to end in death because it's going to be coming out of your eyes, your ears, all of your orifices, and it's going to make itself known. So to me, the symbolism there is just amazing.
And it
I,
lines up, like when we get to talking about the colors and the order of the rooms, that
yes.
same concept of life into death.
Yes, exactly. I think also the Red Death arriving at midnight is genius
Yes.
because it connects life and death. You think about like when the clock is starting to strike midnight, it is ending one day and beginning the next day. When that ebony clock, and I love that it's an ebony clock and
Yes.
it's gigantic, it's ending that day of revelry. How do you pronounce that? Revelry.
Revel. We should
Um,
know, being around Mardi Gras areas, we should
that's
know how to
right.
say revel. Revelry.
revelry. But then it starts the new day with, in this case, the new day is a day of death. I mean, when that clock strikes midnight, then, death has come. That's it. It's the over with. And that's at that point where death is unavoidable at this point. And Jen read that last line. And darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. It's the
And
end.
midnight is one of Poe's favorite times. And, naturally that's kind of like the spooky time, but also if you have listened to me talk any amount of time, I love to talk about liminality and liminal spaces. So midnight is a liminal time because, like you said, we're going from the end of one day into the beginning of another. And so anytime there are liminal spaces, liminal seasons, like when we go into winter solstice and other solstices and equinox, the belief is that the veil between the world of the living and the dead is at its thinnest. So it just makes sense that all of this happens at midnight. Like somebody could write a whole paper on all the, Poe stories and poems that use midnight. It's one of my favorite things.
Well, and think about it. A lot of times we are sleeping at midnight. So we're not as much in danger of facing whatever it is that is happening at midnight during that period of time. But it really does. I think my mom used to always say, like you really shouldn't be out past midnight because nothing good happens, after midnight kind of thing. And I just think to myself, okay, well, is that because of that period of time? I don't know. I don't know, but I love it. I do love it. So Cameron says liminal spaces. I'm a sucker for that.
Yes.
And ED says, I didn't think of that. The colors of the rooms going from life into death. Yes, there is a progression. We're going to talk about that a little more as we go through it. Jellicle said, ooh, I never thought about midnight falling into the liminal category. I love that. Yeah, I mean, it gives you a new appreciation, as to why so many of his poems, because his life, he had so much death in his life, starting at a very young age. And so I don't know if he was necessarily fixated with death. I don't know if that's the right word. I just think it just crossed his path so many times that it's just something that was always on his mind. It was always happening, I don't know. You could probably speak more to that, Jen, his background with that. What do you think? I mean,
well, his mother died when he was 2, so he never really knew her. And his father wasn't very involved. So then he was sent to his foster parents, and his foster father and he never got along. So he really felt abandoned in a lot of ways by parents, whether it was unintentional, like his mom, which is one of the reasons he had that obsession with the women's deaths. And then, of course, his wife, Virginia, who died of tuberculosis a couple of years before Poe died. So he's constantly had death around him, especially the death of women that he loved. So it was just a natural way, I feel, for him to express that grief, to write about these things. So I think that's one of the reasons, out of all the reasons I love Poe, is the way that he could write about his grief. And I can identify with that.
Yeah. I just, he had such a sad life to me. And out of that sadness, he was able to create some of the best literature that anyone can read. I mean, it amazes me that's even possible. So Enchanted Crimson, I can't speak today. I really want to watch the Fall of the Usher show. Maybe start it today. I'd like to read and reread the stories before watching each corresponding episode. I think that's a great idea because I watched the whole entire series last year with my husband. And while I'm familiar with the stories that were represented, and I caught a lot of the characters being named after characters in his stories and poetry, there were some things I missed. Like there are monologues that the characters are speaking that are literally unabridged, portions of his poetry and his stories. And so it's just a matter of, going back and seeing, kind of dissecting each episode just to see, what's going on, with that. And that to me is a testament to Mike Flanagan's genius of being able to put that whole entire series together, because it's amazing to me how he did that. And I think it makes you appreciate Poe's work even more, and how the root, like he's rooted in so much of our popular culture. I don't know. It's just amazing to me. I strongly recommend that. And it's a good idea if you want to refresh your memory on the stories. So our second theme is the Red Death serves as a moral decay. And for me with this is where the distinction of the classes come in. This story is about Prince Prospero and his guests representing the privileged class. And through their wealth, the guests buy their way into Prospero's castellated abbeys. So it's like, unless they had to have wealth in order to get in, and they had to have some kind of provisions to bring along with them. The common people are all on their own. And Prospero and his guests think nothing of the common people for like 5 to 6 months. They think nothing of the suffering that these people are going through. And again, we're looking at blood. It carries the disease, but it also carries privilege when you think about bloodlines. That's what I was thinking about, the bloodlines. So Prospero thinks he can escape the Red Death because he's wealthy and privileged. He's also very arrogant. And so when the Red Death arrives, it's a shock to Prospero, who is too arrogant to realize that wealth cannot buy him immortality.
Yep.
Okay, so there is, so go ahead and say what you want to say, because I have one little other part and I want to read the quote that goes with it. But add on to that, Jen. What do you think?
I love what you said about the blood having to do with the bloodlines when it comes to the class system. It depending on what kind of family you were born into. If you're born into the wealthy upper class, or if you're born into the lower class. And I know this is a probably cliche and it's a movie based on an actual event, but it just brought to mind that line in Titanic, James Cameron's movie, where Rose's mom, Rose is talking about how a lot of the people on the Titanic are going to die because they're not letting them into the lifeboats, because they're only letting the first class in. And her mother says, not the better half. And that just sticks with me. The idea of only caring about people who are in your class, or people who look like you, people who live like you. And I feel like that's a timeless theme that remains relevant.
Well, and I also think it was something that was part of Poe's life, because even though Poe did not start his life off with wealth. I mean, his mom was an actress on the stage, and the father was not present. And when she passed, he did get adopted by an affluent family, but even being sent to some of the best schools, even being able to travel to Europe, even being able to have, being dressed in finery or whatever it was, Poe always had it thrown in his face about being less than, that he really was not, wealthy. He really was not of that bloodline, because he was adopted. He was the adopted Poe. He wasn't, born into that. And that was thrown in his face a lot. I feel like saying, he really should have the last laugh, because any of those people, none of them ever reached the legacy that Poe has today, But I think that is a common topic or theme that you'll see throughout his stories, because of what the impact had on himself. And also I wanted to mention that Jen makes the comment the Netflix show did such a great job with this theme, especially when you get to the last episode when it's explained. And that is so true because in the Masque of the Red Death episode, you see Prospero. He's trying to open his nightclub, and he opens it without the permission of Roderick and Madeline. And so, of course, there are some fatal consequences as a result of that, that impacts not only the people who are there at that masquerade, but also the family itself are impacted in more ways than one. And it's true, by the end of the series, you're finding out wealth can only get you so far. I mean, at some point, you're going to have to cash in that card. You know what I'm saying? Because you are human, and we can't get out of this any other way through death. And I guess it's just going to depend on what type of death you're going to have. Are you going to have a really horrific death, or are you going to have a death that, a peaceful death kind of thing? And Prospero, I think, thinks he's just going to be whatever, he's going to make it out alive, and everything's going to be just wonderful and hunky-dory. But at the end of the day, whatever his falseness of thinking that he is immortal, he turns in that card, right? So, and I want to say to that, that's where final judgment, the Red Death is the final judgment to him. When you see that quote, there was a sharp cry, the dagger dropped gleaming on the sable carpet, upon which instantly afterwards fell prostrate in death the Prince Prospero. And to me, it's sort of like you have to bend to the will of death at that point.
Ooh, I love it.
So what do you think? I mean,
I love that. I love that idea of, you said bend into the will, prostrate, and that alliteration to prostrate, Prospero. It's just chef's kiss for Poe, and just you too for pointing that idea out, that prostrate, that all this that he did and all that he thought his wealth and nobility could elevate him above death. He found out, no, it's not.
Well, I mean, he ended up having to prostrate to death as all these wealthy people did to him, whether it was literal or metaphorically. I mean, that they were kissing his ring or whatever that they do with royalty. But to me, it's sort of like, you're so arrogant, look at what you have to do. So it's like, I love that. I love that at the end of the day, he gets it, So yeah, Jamie says, yes, Jen, that is unfortunately so relevant today. It is. It's the haves and the have not. And, unfortunately for the have nots, you can't even change that. And that even was how it was during that time period. You have somebody in charge, and there's not really much you can do about it. I mean, you can try to fight, but at the end of the day, it's like, until that power or the class distinction is thrown out the window, or something cuts it off, or whatever the case may be, you're going to have that distinction, and you're going to be reminded of it. And that's what I think Prospero, which made me disgusted with him as a human being, is that people knew what was going on in his abbey while they were suffering. And it was sort of like in your face, kind of thing. And that to me is just disgusting when a human, when that happens. And Ed says, I didn't finish the series when it came out, but that episode yes, it will. That was a powerful episode. I liked it too, because there was a lot to do with the colors. I love all the color, the symbolisms with the color, the red, because red can mean got opposites. You've got love, but you also have anger. So you've got the good and the bad mixed together. But when you think about it, Prospero also loved money. He loved power. He loved, all of the things that could be negative with love, but then there's also the passion of it. So, to me, the Red Death, I love that it is the Red Death, because it shows the opposite of that as well,
Mhm.
and kind of cuts off all the negativity. Hello, Angela. Late but here. Well, welcome. We appreciate you being here. It would be a completely different story if Prospero had used his wealth to help his kingdom. He might still have died, but then we could be reading about a saint instead of thinking they deserved it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I do think Poe always had some intention in mind when he was writing his stories. And there's probably a couple of things that were influencing him at the time. It could have been something that he recently read or something that was going on and during that time period. And Jen and I are going to talk about what the influence is, what we thought the influence might be for him writing it specifically at that time, too, is interesting. So the third theme is the illusion of safety is fragile. And I don't know if you want to go ahead and begin with this one, what you think about this one.
Just the people believing that not only that their wealth and their being shut off from reality was going to save them, but the idea of the mask again, that they thought they could hide from death, but they thought they could also hide from being perceived in their wicked ways, their whatever they're doing in these rooms. Because when we talk more about the rooms, we'll talk about how there were no lights in there, just these braziers, these fires casting all these shadows. So it just reminds me of that, saying about whatever's done in the dark comes out in the light. You can't hide it. And in the same way, they could not hide from death. It was coming for them. And that is something that makes me happy to think about. The truth will out, that people who are doing shady things, that they will be found. So I find this story inspirational. I don't know what that says about me.
No, but it is true. I think that lies are always revealed. It might not be immediate. Sometimes I think that it's time will pass and, it will be revealed at some point. And the thing about it is, whenever you're doing something wrong, at some point, somehow it's going to come out. For Prospero here, it was the fact that you were dealing with an illness that eventually caught up with, him and all these wicked people. But no matter whatever it is in life, at some point, some way. I mean, I even kind of think to myself, with this, there was a reason that illness got into the Abbey. We don't know how it got in the Abbey, but it also could be because of the shadiness and what happened. But for me, it's the castellated Abbey provides a temporary refuge for Prince Prospero and his wealthy guests. It provided deep seclusion. A strong and lofty wall surrounds it. Gates of iron, bolts are welded. When you think about all of how he's describing it, plenty of provisions and precautions, but there's no care or thought given to the outside world. And he says, who could take care of itself? So, I don't even care what's going on. I have all of this. I have this fortress, that is locking us all in. But with that being said, it's also what causes your death, because you've trapped yourself in this tight fortress.
Yes.
So that's where that falseness of this safety or the security. So we know as the reader that this is a false sense of security. We know that no matter what you do, you can't keep away from whatever an illness is. Somehow it's going to get in some way, right? I think it's foreshadowed by the gigantic clock of ebony. If you read the quote on 258, okay, it's marking that time. It says, its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang. And when the minute hand made the circuit of the face and the hours was to be stricken, there came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that at each lapse of an hour the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken to the sound. And thus the waltzers, perforce ceased their evolutions, and there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay company. And while the chimes of the clock yet rang, it was observed that the giddiness grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows as if in confused reverie or meditation. And then it would resume itself once the clock stopped. So that right there marks not only the passage of time, but it also leads to the complacency of these people over the course of days and weeks and months, and gives them false security. They are aware that there is time passing every time they hear that clock, right? It causes them to pause, but it doesn't make them stop, because nothing happens after the clock, right? Nothing is revealed. So it's sort of like, okay, another hour has passed, another day has passed, another month has passed. Somehow there's a sense they're beating the plague,
Right.
but it's false, right? And we know that. And I think that's where the foreshadowing comes in. At some point, their provisions are going to run out. At some point, Prospero is going to piss off one of his people that are manning the doors. You know, maybe a family member comes to the Abbey and is like, please help us, you know, please. And it's a family member, and they're like, what am I doing? I'm behind here and I'm protecting this jerk, you know? And so they bring in an infected person because, you know, you've got the ties to your people, your bloodline, right? And so I think someone gets careless, or they get tired, and they're just like, I'm done with this. And then the Red Death makes his way in. You know, he just flows in, right? And again, it's sort of like you can't run from death. Like that's in our beginning when we talked about death being unavoidable, being natural and unavoidable. You can't run from it, and you can't hide from it. You know, it's going to come calling for you at some point, and there's not anything you can do about it.
And I think it's interesting too, because like you were saying, when they bolted everything, you know, of course, Poe in his writing is like no ingress, no egress, so no way in, but there's also no way out. And I feel like the people on some level, the reason why they all stop when the hour comes is because they know somewhere within themselves that they are screwed, that there's no way, just because they're shut up in here, there's no way they're going to escape. But once it passes, you know, and I think we do the same thing sometimes about certain things. Our human nature is to, you know, think or to know something is going to happen. And then we're like, okay, it didn't happen yet. Let's just go on with life. And then something comes along and we're like, reminded again.
Exactly. And other thing too is I think it also makes them realize that they're trapped in this abbey, that they really don't have anywhere else to go. I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, they got to go with the flow. I'm sure that there were some people there that probably questioned at some point. I mean, I cannot imagine everybody buying into this, maybe in the very beginning. But I'm sure there were some that were tired of being there, tired of being under his rules and what was going on. And we know that wicked things were happening, right? So, I mean, there were probably some people getting tired of all that as well. And then how are you going to get out? You weren't going to be able to be let go, but maybe someone did. And that's how death got in. I mean, we don't know how it got in, right? So at that point, you leave it up to your interpretation. How did the Red Death get into the Abbey? You know, there's so many, you know, possibilities to that. And Jamie says you can't hide the lies forever. Again, Jen, so relevant today, and you are on a roll. He says agreed. And also that bit with the clock and how all reacted to it was just masterful. I agree. I just think there's something about that. And I think you've seen that in movies or shows where a clock is relevant like that. I don't know if what was the name of that movie? I think it was a Stanley Kubrick movie. It's been a long time, so I might be making this up. But was it Eyes Wide Shut? Wasn't that the name of the movie?
Yeah, there is with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman.
Yes. Wasn't there like some part in there? They were masked in that. There was a lot of wickedness happening there, right? Yeah. Wasn't there something about time and people turning to look, or
I think so. I think so. Not really in the movie Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, but in Stephen King's novel, he draws on the Masque of the Red Death because there's that ebony clock in the gold room. So, it is something we see, this idea of time passing, this idea of a clock. I'd have to rewatch
I
Eyes
would
Wide
have to
Shut.
I would have to
Yeah.
rewatch the Stanley Kubrick movie. It's been a long time, but for some reason, I just have this image of in my mind of people in the mass, like looking over. Something signals it, whether it's a clock, whether it's a gong, whether whatever it is, a sound, something. But I don't know. The mask, I think that whole thing of being hidden with the mask and all that, you see that in other different stories, other ways, like shedding the mask and seeing what's behind that, and that's causing death at some point to that person, whether it's physical or to the soul or whatever. But also too, Stanley Kubrick in his movie also shows like all that blood that comes down the hall
Yes.
of the elevators, and I think that's significant also,
Mm-hmm.
to the impending death of how you're going to end up,
Yes.
So, and there's a lot. There's the ball in The Shining,
Yes. Yep. And the
So
unmask.
yeah. Oh my gosh, we could do like a whole deep dive on the influences
Yes.
of this in pop culture for sure. So, what about, do you want to talk a little more? Because I know you said about the class distinction. We kind of grouped that a little bit with that theme, that other theme. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, I think we covered it well.
Okay. So let's talk about the 7 rooms, because that is significant, I think. Let's see. Nope. I'm sorry, y'all, with this. I don't know what is with the deal with this clock. I didn't put a timer on all of this. This is a new StreamYard thing. And okay, let's see. Save. Okay. Yay. Okay. So, what is the significance of the 7 rooms in Prince Prospero's Abbey? What do you think, Jen? I mean, we kind of touched a little bit on it.
I love to talk about these 7 rooms, the way they're laid out from east to west. So you have the sunrise or birth to sunset or death, and of course the clock being in that final room. But I also like to talk about the color symbolism. So if you don't mind, we can talk a little bit about that. Like I
Oh,
have
yeah.
a
Yeah,
few
yeah, yeah.
notes. So blue can represent a few things, but I'm just gonna, hone in on the things that are relevant to this story. So the color blue can represent birth.
Mhm.
So makes sense. That's the first room. The second room is purple, which represents royalty. So when we think too about these class distinctions, Prospero, and some of these, all these others really are born into royalty. So you're kind of moving in that order. Then the third room is green. So green can mean wealth, but it can also mean envy. So I think that could fit either way for this green room. The fourth one being orange represents power and energy. So when you think about power, Prospero is in power. So he's born into royalty. He's got wealth. Now he's in power. And then we go to the fifth room. It's white, which is a really interesting room to me because that represents purity or innocence. So I think that's kind of a contradiction because nobody in this abbey is pure nor innocent. So I feel like that's like this, almost like this facade, like this mask, this room here masking what's really there. And then you have the sixth room, which is violet, which is kind of interesting because you have purple, but then you have violet. But
Right.
one meaning for violet is future. So it's really neat that that is the next to the last room because the future holds death for all of these people and they don't know it. They may think they've got a prosperous future, but they step into that next room, it's not going to be the case. And then, of course, we get the final room, which is black, representing death. And
Right.
also the red in there, the only room, the last room being the only room that doesn't have everything matching. It's got both the red and the black, which goes back to the Red Death,
Mm-hmm.
the red blood representing death with the black. So that's my little nerdy love for
No,
these.
but I love that. I love that because you're going into the symbolism of the colors for that and how it base. My interpretation is like the stages of life until death. I was hoping to find Andrew's paper, my son Andrew, because when he was in high school, he wrote a paper about the significance of the colored rooms in this story. And I remember him going through like the age of each color. So, of course, blue being birth, purple, childhood, kind of like to adolescence, green, more like young adulthood, vitality, and those years of life. Orange being almost like a midlife period of time. White being older, where you almost wonder as you're getting older, you kind of think about maybe reflect on things that you've done in your life. So maybe that's where the comparison with the purity and the innocence. At one time you were pure and innocent, but through
Mhm.
choices, now you're in this situation, you're older. Maybe you can redeem yourself. Maybe you cannot. The people
Right.
obviously with Prospero are not going to be able to redeem themselves. Violet, preparing for death, preparing to make that transition to your end of life, which I love the fact that they had no idea. And I love that the Red Death walks through each of the rooms to get
Yeah.
to, the black room at the end, and he's just waiting. And Prospero is just running through, meets his death as all of the others are compelled to go through, to do the same because they're going to follow through. I think they think that they're going to somehow cheat death themselves,
Right.
but it's so
Yeah.
ridiculous, right? And then, of course, that black room is our death, at the end. So that's what I was thinking of, just based on because of Andrew's research on it. But yeah, there's a lot of correlation between the colors that he chose for each of those rooms. And I did think it was interesting. We'll talk about it more when we get to that point, but colors were significant in the 1964 film as well. Not all of the colors were the same, but the colors were represented there. And I thought that was kind of interesting how they were portrayed because you didn't see all 7 rooms in the movie, but they were represented by the end of the movie kind of thing. But yeah, I think they and you're even told that the guests avoid the black room because it's a fear of their death.
Mhm.
And the ebony clock is a constant reminder that death is unavoidable. So that it's there and it's ringing, but there is a part there where they're doing whatever they're doing, but they just kind of bypass that room.
Yep. They're like, no, we ain't going in that one.
Yeah. Well, it's also the fear of the unknown. I
Yes.
mean, think about it and that's a fear of why people have a fear of the dark because you
Right.
can't see anything
Right.
and there could be something lurking in the dark,
Yeah.
right?
And
And
the rooms are
so
laid out too where you can't see, like Poe's sure to write that it's not all where you can see from one room to the next. Everything's in this kind of circular view. So you can't see the next room, which is also indicative of life. You can't see what's coming next. So it's just he does so many things with the colors, the number of rooms, because some
yes.
scholars connect the 7 rooms to the 7 deadly sins, or the
Ooh.
7 rooms to the 7 stages of life, like from Shakespeare's play, All the World's a Stage, and what does he say? We're merely players, and he goes through 7 stages of life. So just like you said, we could talk 4 hours.
Well, also like the 7 deadly sins, that these people that are in this abbey are committing all of them.
Yes. Yes. Gluttony, lust,
Sloth,
yes,
envy. Yeah, I mean, it's all there. It's all laid out for them. So
pride.
I like that kind of theory. I
Mhm.
mean, I might have to go and do a deep dive on that myself just to see about that. But also too, I think you mentioned this, that there is the red that's in the black room. All of the windows, there's a stained glass window that mimics the color of the room except for the black. Isn't
Yes.
it red?
It
It's
is,
red,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
the
so in
window's red.
death is all in red.
Yeah.
So, and the window, the window is the to your, what is it? The window is
Eyes
the
to the soul.
eyes to the soul.
Yeah.
Yes, something like that. Where the red death, the red window.
Yep. Red eyes, red face, red rum. No, different story.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, well, I think about Amityville Horror because
Yeah, that's
the
true.
pig Jody had the red
Yeah,
eyes.
that's true.
That freaks me out. I'm sorry. Anything with devil possession freaks me out. So I will not ever forget that, because that movie came out in the 70s. And that movie, there's like one of those movies that I have not watched in a long time because it's just freaky to me. Between the pig with the red eyes and the
Yeah.
flies, I'm just like, no, 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 no. So Jamie was saying there was a character in Eyes Wide Shut in a red cloak that was the leader of the masked cult. I wonder if Kubrick was referencing Poe here.
Probably.
Yeah, that is very possible. Very, very possible, because I see a lot of the imagery. Like when I think back about The Shining, I see the imagery with that. Also, too, if you remember, there's a scene where Jack Torrance is passing rooms, or maybe it's Danny. Somebody walks in on a man and a woman in a room, and the man, I'm assuming it's a man, it could be a woman, has the mask. Isn't it a dog mask or something
Oh
on?
yeah, that's probably those two men in the room together, and the dog is
Yes.
probably
Yeah,
performing
so okay,
classical.
yeah,
Yeah,
so, anyway, I think about that scene too, because again, you're hiding
right,
behind your
yeah,
mask so that no one can see what you're doing. I mean, they can see what you're doing, but they don't know it's you that's doing it, kind of thing.
right.
And I think again, it's to that. And also Jack Torrance has a mask, right?
Yep,
He's hiding behind his mask of alcoholism, and he's fighting his demons and all that kind of stuff. Or he's putting on the mask that he's okay, but he's
right,
not.
right.
When that mask falls, it's all hell breaks loose, right? And I was just thinking circular, like the circle of life.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So that's how it's set up, in that circle of life, and it's going to keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Very nice. I find the color analysis fascinating. Yes. I think the colors, to me, that is another thing that you'll find with Poe. Poe uses colors a lot throughout his
Mm-hmm.
throughout his stories, and there's a lot of shadow and, things that are happening in the darkness. But that's kind of how people are in life. I
It
mean,
is. Yeah.
a lot of people wear masks. I mean, not a physical one, but they wear a mask. And
Mhm.
then, sometimes it's revealed, but yeah, there's a reason for it all, right?
Yeah.
And the significance of 7. Yes. I don't know I know that 7, always considered 7 like a good luck number kind of thing. But I know that there's more significance to 7. Do you know all the significances or some of them,
I know
Jen?
it's supposed to be like the perfect number. 7 is considered to be a perfect number. So when we think too, we have 7 days of the week also. So that's, maybe something like grasping at straws, but still that's some life, 7 days a week from beginning to end. So just
Oh,
a lot of thoughts about 7 being a number of completion to a number of perfection and completion.
hmm. Yeah, that is fascinating. I love it. It's so much. This is why Poe is a literary genius, in my
He
opinion.
was,
There's so
yeah.
much. 777 is considered godly, the afterlife.
Mm,
Very nice. And there's biblical references for 7 as well.
okay.
Yes. Okay, so our last question before we talk briefly about the movie adaptation, or unless there's some other, we might have some other stuff to piggyback on, but is what was Poe's influence? And please add any of your thoughts. If there was any kind of interpretation you had that is different from what Jen and I have discussed, we're always excited about hearing about another type of interpretation. Like the whole seven deadly sins, I wasn't even correlating that, considering what was happening in this house, considering what happened in, Mike Flanagan's version. If you
Yes.
think about all of, the characters, all of those characters in his story exemplified
Yep.
one of those sins, right? So here I'm going to put in this timer thing. I know. At this point, we just have to laugh. It won't let me do anything until the timer counts down. I don't understand that. I've never experienced this before in my life. Oh my goodness. Okay. So we want to talk about what was Poe's influence for writing The Masque of the Red Death. So I don't know. This is me just loosely kind of putting things together. I don't know if there was any kind of a epidemic going on. I do know, like back in the day during Poe's time, there were like issues with cholera and tuberculosis, and Virginia, his wife, I think at the time was suffering with tuberculosis. So I was kind of thinking perhaps he was influenced by her illness. It was weighing really on his mind. I wasn't sure if there was anything else going on in his area. I don't know. That's kind of what I was thinking, that maybe he was influenced because of Virginia's. What about you, Jen?
I think that is probably part of it too. I agree with you. Tuberculosis. There are, like you said, also speculations that this is cholera. But another idea is that this is related to the Black Death, because especially when you think about class distinctions, and during the Black Death, so many of the peasant workers died that really brought the end to feudalism, because there were no more workers. These royalty, this upper class didn't have any more workers. So when you think about Prince Prospero shutting out the lower class, and they all died representing the same, the actual historical event, the Black Death caused an end to feudalism.
I didn't realize that. I mean, I knew it took out a lot of people, but I didn't realize that was the end of feudalism. I mean, if I ever learned that, I forgot about it. And that's what Enchanted Crimson is saying. Was Poe familiar with the Black Death? I would say yes. And also, too, with his knowledge of death and, that impact that it had on his life, I think that he probably was cognizant of historical periods of time where death was prevalent.
And he had that classical education, so history, literature, so Shakespeare. That's why he also knows, like the history and literary references that he uses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I love this story. I mean, because it has so much depth to it. And I think it, like we talked about, it mimics what's going on in our time today. I think it probably could mimic any time, at any time that you would have read it. There was something going on that, because that is something that I don't think will ever go away as long as we have human beings, and that's class distinction. I can't say, as long as you've got power, and people abuse power, I think we'll never ever get past that, for sure. So do you have any final thoughts on the story itself before we move on to talking a little bit about the movie adaptation?
I think we covered it. I love it. Great story. One of my favorites. That's all I could say.
So if anybody has any other thoughts, how you felt about this story, It's one of my faves. It's one of Jen's faves. Is this a new favorite for you? Was this the first time you read The Masque of the Red Death? Was it a reread? Did you get anything out of it upon reread? That's what I think is so interesting about reading Poe, is that you can read it and reread it and reread it, and every time you read it you get something else out of it, or you focus on something else in the story. I read it 3 times just within this week. One of my rereads was listening to Christopher Lee read it, which
Yeah.
is a treat, but it's just, kind of focusing on certain words and certain passages and what does it mean and why did he choose those words. So I'd love to know if this is a favorite of anyone's. Let us know in the comments, in the chat, if this is one of your favorites, if it was your first time reading it, if it was a reread. I'd love to know that as well. Ed said it's definitely a favorite of mine. I think this is the 3rd time reading it. Excellent. I love that. And it's okay if it was not a favorite of yours, or you didn't like it, or maybe you didn't understand it. I mean, that's the thing too about Poe, is sometimes people read these stories by him, and because of how it's written, it's in a language we're not used to nowadays. We're used to, literature that's a little bit more contemporary. And so you got some big words in there, some words you might not know, some words you might have to look up or whatever. I know that was the biggest thing when I taught Poe to my junior high students. We did the Telltale Heart and also the Black Cat, and then we would look at the Raven. There was a lot of times vocabulary is the first thing that we had to talk about. Was like, you're going to see some words in here that you've probably never, ever encountered in your young life. So let's talk about it, because some of these words, like, I'm not familiar with,
No, I still, reading his stories, will still have to look up, vocabulary words or historical events or some literary references, like the one he mentioned here, like not seen since Hernia or Henry or something like that. I had to look that up, and it was a Victor Hugo play about this kind of outlaw guy who pushed back against societal standards. I'm like, well, that makes sense, but I didn't know what it was till I looked it
I
up.
didn't know what it was. I'm glad you looked it up and schooled us on it.
Yeah, I was like, what is this?
One word that I love that he likes to use is the word sagacious.
Yes.
I mean, it just sounds awesome to me, but that's one of the words we've seen that before in other stories. Jamie said, great discussion as always. It's definitely a favorite, and any story that brings the elite back down to earth with the rest of us is a favorite for me.
Here,
I
here,
agree.
yes.
I agree. And then I enjoyed both the story and the film. I also enjoyed the research on the story that I did. Rena's coming in to visit Jen. And I had read a YA adaptation of The Masque of the Red Death that focused a lot on classicism or classism. I liked it and had been wanting to read Poe's story ever since. This was the first time I read the story. That's good to know. I did see, and I wrote the story down. If you remember what the title is, it might be...
I have this, His Hideous Heart. It was red. I read that yesterday, if that's the one you mean.
To ask me, let me know, because I found a story, a YA adaptation, and I haven't gotten it, but I'm going to look into getting it because I would like to see. But Red, I thought, was a pretty decent adaptation of it. Follows the story pretty
Hilary Monahan is the author.
Yeah. So we're going to move into the movie. So if you want to stick around to listen to that. I do not like The Black Cat. I enjoyed this one.
The Black Cat's a tough read. I did write a paper on it in grad school, but it's sad.
It is. And if you're a cat lover, it makes it even worse, in my opinion. Carmen said, this was my first time reading it. I'm going to reread it after this discussion. It will make a lot more sense the second time around. I agree. I lost track of my rereads of this one. I also really enjoyed checking out retellings and reimaginings. Me too, Stina. And yes, classics. And it keeps auto-correcting me. Gotcha. I also read from His Hideous Heart, and I enjoyed it. And it was many time reread for me. I love the lush Gothic vibes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of Gothic horror fiction. And ED said, I can't do the Black Cat. It's a tough one. It is. And yeah, the Black Cat is tough. And I love that little short film that I found for my students because it was just really atmospheric. And I love that, you being told the story, because one of the questions I ask my students, we know in the Black Cat that he's talking to someone because he's, in like jail or being questioned,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. The Telltale Heart, I always like to ask my kids the question because both of them are unreliable narrators. Who do you think he's speaking to? Who is he talking to? Who is he confessing to? Kind of thing. And it's the same thing in the film, who he's confessing to. But, again, who is he confessing to in the Black Cat? Because he does have that guilty conscience of what he's done, poor Pluto.
I know.
Okay, so now we're going to briefly talk about the Vincent Price film from 1964. Again, we will be talking spoilers, not a lot. We're not going to go into depth about it because on a whim, because neither one of us had seen the 1964 film, and we had some of our friends watching it. We just decided, hey, let's go ahead and fit this in and then just speak to it. I will say that, of course, I love Vincent Price. I will preface that. I think he's a wonderful actor. And I can see that this director, Roger Corman, is a good director. Because I did also watch his adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher, which I did enjoy much better than the Masque of the Red Death. But I have to say, and I'll have to preface this whenever I recommend the movie, it was loosely based on The Masque of the Red Death, the short story. It's sort of like The Shining, reading The Shining, the book, and then watching Stanley Kubrick's movie. On their own, wonderful pieces of art. You know what I'm saying? But if you're one that loves a story, the book or a short story, and you like the adaptation to be a little more tied to it, you might be a little disappointed with the Vincent Price adaptation. And Jen's shaking her head. Yeah. Jen, you go ahead and say what disappointed you first.
Well, to be fair, this was my first time watching any of the adaptations of Poe's works because I am
with the exception of The Fall of the House of
Usher. I love The Fall of the House of Usher. See, that was perfect to me. But I'm a Poe purist, so I didn't know what to expect. And I do also love Vincent Price very much. Just a brief aside, when my dad was in the Air Force, he was stationed in Germany, and he went over to London with his friends at one point, and they saw Vincent Price on the street. And I've never forgiven my dad because he did not get an autograph from Vincent Price. Oh. So yes, I love Vincent Price, but my first watch of this movie, I was like, what the hell is this? I don't understand what's happening. But then I did a brief little research right before we came on, and I appreciate it a lot more. I love the color elements, and I did find out that Roger Corman drew from Mario Bava's The Whip and the Body to get these color schemes. And so that's a Giallo film, and I like Giallo, so I was like, that's cool, because I already like the colors anyway. And then that this hooded figure of death was inspired by the cloaked visage in The Seventh Seal, which I've never seen. Ingmar Bergman, I know that name, but I've never seen that. Right. So I was like, I get this. And then some of the cultural context said it could have been connected to this 1963 Profumo scandal in Britain, which influenced this depiction of the wealthy elite having these depraved mass parties. So I get it. I understand. And I appreciate it a lot more after finding some of these references.
Well, and also too, I do appreciate, I do think that there's aspects of it. Let's put it this way. Poe did not go into what was actually happening in the Abbey.
Right.
The film does. The
Yeah.
film does show that, okay? I think the color schemes, I loved how the red popped out. You know, that was significant. I love that we did have rooms represent, you know, there, but they were not, all of the rooms were not there. Now, I will say there was a different color, so that explains why the colors were not the same as the colors that Poe chose, because there was at the end a yellow hooded figure. And I'm assuming those hooded figures were not all death, perhaps. That's the only thing.
I know at one point they were talking about the yellow room, and he was saying that Prospero was saying he'd put somebody in there and cage them in there, and then when they got out, they couldn't even look at the sunshine or anything else yellow. So I'm like, okay. And then I thought
So
it
I
was
was just
funny
wondering,
that
but, you know, I almost wonder if the hooded figures in the film were signifying the 7 deadly sins.
yeah, I think that makes sense.
I mean, I was thinking that perhaps. I don't know. I didn't mind the red hooded figure guy. I thought he was kind of mysterious. I loved how he was just very, you know, there, and how he interacted, you know, with people, and he made choices of who was going to be touched by the plague and who was not.
Right. Yeah, I like that depiction.
Yes, and I do like that he got Prospero at the end.
And I love the Hop Frog, which the
Yeah.
Poe story is Hop Frog, but I literally laughed out loud when they called him Hop Toad.
Yes.
And I
was like,
love
"Oh my
what they
gosh."
did with the story, and that jerk who slapped that little dancer. I was glad they put him in the ape suit and burned him up. I was like,
Yes.
go.
So that's another thing I want to say. There, I don't know. I did not catch any other references, but I definitely caught the reference of Hop Frog, because Hop Frog is a story, one of the stories that is one of my horror favorites in that category of Poe's work, because it is a story of revenge, and that's exactly what happened in that scene. And it just goes to show how dumb and, like, they, you know, how arrogant these people are when somebody's like feeding them BS, because that's what
Yes,
Hop Toad in the movie was doing, was
right.
feeding him BS about how he's going to be so great and all that stuff, and that's how he got the revenge on him, right? But I did not see any other references. So if anybody else watched the movie and saw any other Poe references besides Hop Frog in it, let me know. I would love to know. I thought it was well done, practical effects and things like that for the time period of when it was filmed. As a standalone, I get it. And I even asked Jen, do you think there was something going on, like, you know, some kind of a thing with saint worship? You know how, like, there's periods of time where people were like in hysteria about something and whatever. And I do know that Jen said very loosely, curious about the Christianity versus worship in Satan direction, because that has nothing to do with Poe. I mean, obviously, if you do think of it as the 7 deadly sins in the Masque of the Red Death by Poe, then yes, you've got that, you know, well, that's all what the devil loves and relishes, but we don't get that from the short story. So that's the angle I really didn't care about.
I did notice one little thing, and this may, maybe a little thing, but I noticed Prospero talked about how he had an ancestor who had tortured and executed people during the Inquisition, which would be the pit and the pendulum. And he was talking about how they did horrible things in the name of God. And then he's doing these horrible things in the name of Satan. So I was like, is this also, like Jen's asking about Christianity versus worshiping Satan, is this also about the way that religion can be used to torture and kill others? Not all the time, obviously, because there are people who practice religion and they don't do these things. But I thought that was an interesting, concept to, sorry, dogs in my house. And people
That's how mine were earlier.
It just made me think about, is this a commentary on the harmful aspects of religious zealotry?
It's possible. It's possible because, and also too, him wanting to put his ideas onto the young woman to give up her faith. But he was also intrigued by it. You know what I'm saying?
Her faith seemed to be like a pure kind. She really
Right.
cared about other people.
Exactly. Edie said, I first saw the film before I ever read the story and love it, more so as an adult than as a kid. Yeah. Swank says 60s and 70s were the rise of the Church of Satan. Several celebrities popularized it. That's interesting to know because I even asked I was talking to my husband about it. I'm like, what about what was going on with that? They had to be something that was influencing that for him to make that choice. So it could be social commentary as to what was happening. And because I don't have that reference, then so that's why I have to say I appreciate the film as a standalone film on its own, but it didn't fulfill my desire of what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
As a post story. And I'm not sure about the 80s version, if the 80s is a remake of the 1964 version, or if it did go in the direction to me more about the short story. Because, with The Shining, Stephen King was not happy with Kubrick's version, and he could not do anything about it until he could get the rights back for it. So you have Stanley Kubrick's version, and Kubrick's choices are interesting, and on its own is a fantastic film.
Yes.
I mean, I will give it 5 stars for being a fantastic film. Isn't that right? I mean, I don't know if I give it 5 stars, but I do have to give credit for that. It's well made. He has a vision. I mean, Stanley Kubrick was a wonderful director. As far as like his vision, I don't know if he was a wonderful person, but
not to poor Shelley Duvall, right?
According to Shelley Duvall, that is correct. So every time you see Shelley Duvall really in fear, that was all natural. She really was fearful at that point in the scenes. But when he got the rights back and they made the made-for-TV version with Steven Weber in it, you had more of a pure stick to the story for The Shining. And I'm wondering if that's how the 1980s, is it going to fulfill our need to see the Masque of the Red Death?
I want to know.
Yeah, I want to know, but I will tell you, I loved how Mike Flanagan portrayed the Masque of the Red Death, because to me, I got out of it the story. Because if you think about what happens to the people in that nightclub, it kind of mimics what I think the Red Death would have done, that plague would have done to the people. Like the outcome. I mean, that's just me. I could be wrong, but Paula's popping in. Hi, Kat, Jen, and Chad. I haven't read the book, but I wanted to pop in and hug the like button. Well, we appreciate that very, very much. So anyway, that's where I stand with the movie. I mean, it didn't fulfill what I thought it was going to fulfill. But there are aspects and elements of it that I do appreciate. And after seeing Roger Corman's other adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher, which also stars Vincent Price, and I want to say that was 1960, I was pleased. The vision was there, I mean, and the practical effects and everything, you have to appreciate it for the time that it, was. But I would recommend you watching that one, Jen.
I'll watch it.
And just see how you feel about that one. And then get back to me and let me know. Swank was saying that I read a story of the Masque of the Red Death that was redesigned from Dead Easy. Okay, I've never heard of that. Stina said, one of my rereads was an immersion read of the fine art edition with the Rudnicki narration. It was an intense experience.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, but I think the Christianity versus the devil worshiping and what Swank said about what was happening at that time really could. The Price House of Usher is so good and very on point. Yeah.
All right, y'all have me convinced. I'll watch it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you got to give it for the time that it was shot. It was, it stuck to it. And the choices of the actors were pretty good as well. Vincent Price, of course, plays Roderick. So that's all you need to know about him.
I love Vincent Price. Could have had an autograph, but oh well.
Yeah, but look at your dad. Your dad just had no idea.
No.
Ah,
He knew
well,
him. He knew who he was, but he didn't want to bother him, is what he said. I'm like, he's on the street. Bother the man. Come on.
right. Yeah, come on. Give me an autograph for
Right?
my daughter.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't even born because
I
my
know,
dad, he'd been out of the Air Force for a while by the time I was born because he was in there when he was young. But come on.
well, you know what it was? He had no idea that his daughter was going
He
to
had
be
no
a
idea he'd
fan.
have a horror obsessed daughter. That is probably the
That's right.
truth.
That is right. Well, we are at the end of our discussion. If anyone has any last thoughts that you want to share, I want to thank you, Jen, for going down this road with me, with Nevermore, and just being a part of my journey with Poe, because I absolutely love him and I love his work, and I love that I can share and talk to someone who's into his work just as much as I am. So thank you for being a part of this and for helping me choose the group read. Because I'm like, I give Jen some liberties here with like, pick what you think would be a good thing for us to talk about, or what do you think about, this one? But I do appreciate not only Jen being here, but also everyone who either popped in, who was with us the entire chat, for sharing your insights, for sharing, your interpretations, how you felt about it, whether you liked it or not, and also for participating in Nevermore, because that really does makes me feel great. I mean, just to know that there's some people out there that are willing to try Poe. I want to shout out people, like Jen at Pages and Chaos, who had not read any Poe until last year, and then she showed up again. So I was very excited about that, and the fact that she even gave the Mike Flanagan series a try and enjoyed it, because it's not everybody's cup of tea, but the thing about Poe's horror, it's a little bit different than other type of horror, if that makes any sense. And I think it's because it's gothic.
Mm-hmm.
It's steeped in the gothic horror realm or whatever, and there's a lot of things to be scared about in gothic horror that's a little bit different than like slasher or something like that. There's a different appreciation for it. So do you have any last thoughts that you want to share,
Thank
Jen?
you, Kat. Thank you for inviting me to do this. Thank you for creating and hosting one of my best readathons of the whole year. And I just want to say thank you. And thank you to everybody who participated, everybody who's left comments in the chat, and anybody watching on replay. Thank you. Read more Poe. I love you.
Yeah, we really, really appreciate y'all. And Jen has put out another video with Annabelle Lee that I think would be a good watch for everyone if you're not familiar with his poetry, especially. And Kirsten also put a song in the Nevermore channels that is related to that. She either did that or she did it in response to your video. A song that was inspired by Annabelle Lee. So I would recommend both of those if anyone wants to check that out. But yeah, Annabelle Lee is my favorite poem by Edgar Allan Poe. And Jen said, I'm surprised I'm enjoying it as much as I am. And thanks for introducing me to Poe. I am so happy that it worked out. And that you will read more Poe in your life. Again, thank you all very, very much. I appreciate all of you that were here. And spread the word, everyone. Spread the word that Nevermore always takes place during the week of Edgar Allan Poe's birthday. Yes, we both have our little
Show our Poe earring.
We're repping our Poe here. I have to thank Kelsey for this, because Kelsey gave me my earrings. But yeah, I definitely appreciate everybody being here. Appreciate Jellicle popping in a recipe for the Masque of the Red Death. That was very thematic. And until next time, y'all still have time to read some Poe. I'll be reading some Poe, this afternoon. I have to read Ligeia.
Magia.
Ligeia.
Magia. Yeah.
I don't know why I want to have an R in there because there is no R in there. Jen is doing that is her group read for her book club, and that's her selection for January, which I appreciate that. Do you know when that live chat's going to be, Jen?
The live chat will be Sunday, February 8th. I still need to write this, put this out there, but Sunday, February 8th at 1.
At 1 p.m. Yeah, so February 8th at 1 p.m. Central Time.
Yes.
Jen will have her live show for Ligeia. And that's a poem I haven't read in a long time. And I want to reread that one and be there for that as well. So again, thank you all very much. We'll see you somewhere on the internet. And until then, bye, everyone.